Warning, the following podcast is intended for mature audiences only. Listener discretion is advised. If you are sensitive to any content or subject matter in films, I recommend looking up this film on doesthedogdie.com. It is a user-based database of extensive content warnings for pretty much every film you can think of. It basically gives you a heads up to all the potentially triggering topics a movie might have. Check it out and take care of yourself. Welcome back to We Creeps, the podcast where you can get all of your spooky without any of the scares. I am your host, Evan Exhumed, and every week I provide an in-depth summary, review, and trivia for the latest horror releases, classics, and some weird ones you probably never heard of. This week we will be covering a classic to a sequel, which is The Exorcist Believer. This film was written and directed by David Gordon Green, and it stars Leslie Odom Jr., Ann Dowd, Norbert Leo Boots, Olivia O'Neill, Lydia Jewett, Ellen Burstyn, and, drumroll please, a surprise feature for Linda Blair. You might be seeing a lot of low scores for this movie, but honestly, I'm not super tied to this franchise, and I had only seen the original Exorcist like a year ago. I've been pretty transparent that I'm not a huge fan of like many of the 70s and 80s horror movies, mostly just because I didn't grow up with them. I was friends with a lot of horror fans who had seen those movies to death, and they had only really wanted to watch the contemporary stuff, so when I made friends with them, that's all we ever watched. So I don't have a ton of nostalgia for these movies, but the first one I did really like. I thought it was a very solid film, and if I was alive at that point and watched it and wasn't a huge horror person, that movie would probably scare the shit out of me. And I know it scared the shit out of a lot of people in that era, so I gave this one a really fair chance. I tried really hard to not compare it to the other movie, and I really liked it. I thought it was good, and I think people are just being kind of babies about it. I mean, it's not the best movie I've ever seen, but it is interesting, and I think that the trilogy, which is what they're setting up here, is going to be fun. And honestly, the sequels to The Exorcist in general never really did very well, so I don't know. Take that as you will, but let's go ahead and get started on The Exorcist Believer. The film opens up in Haiti, and our main character, Victor Fielding, and his wife, Soreen, who is also very pregnant, are there for work, I guess. He is a photographer. He's taking pictures of, local happenings, the culture, people just living their lives. And while she's just kind of walking around a shopping district, she is prompted by some Haitian women doing some sort of voodoo blessing to bless their child. And I do quite literally mean voodoo, Haitian voodoo. Afterwards, Soreen goes back to where she's staying, gonna take a little pregnancy nap, and then all of a sudden there is a massive earthquake. Yes, we are actually in 2010, and this is the large Haiti earthquake. As a result of trying to get out, going down through the staircase, Soreen unfortunately is toppled with some debris, and her husband, Victor, tries to get her out. Thankfully, he does, but at the hospital or the refugee area, the doctors give him an option. They say, we're only able to provide support for either the baby or for your wife. The two will not be able to both survive. It's going to take some kind of toll on either one of them, so you need to decide. We don't get to see what he picks, but we do see, fast forward, 13 years later, we're now in Percy, Georgia. We are now introduced to Victor and Soreen's daughter, Angela, who is now a 13-year-old girl. She is looking at pictures of her mother, whom we now know she never met. And she's looking a little sad about it. Looks like she really wants that connection and misses that she didn't get that opportunity. She ends up taking a scarf of her mother's in the old box of her stuff. And then we get a little short scene between her and Victor, her dad. And, that she's 13. She's a little sassy here and there. And they kind of get playful. And she's going through a vegan vegetarian phase. And he's teasing her about it. And we can kind of see that they really care about each other and that they're close. And that's just the most important thing about this scene here. As Victor and Angela are heading out to take her to school, we meet a couple of the neighbors who will come up later. One of their neighbors is a nurse named Anne, who is bitching at them about their trash cans not being put away. And then we meet Stuart, who I think invites them to his church or some kind of gathering. And anyway, they make it to the school. And as we see Angela being dropped off, we're also introduced to a few other characters who are going to be very important. One being Catherine, who is one of Angela's friends. We also see Catherine's parents, Miranda and Tony, and they're kind of just like a Christian-y centrist vibes kind of people, people who really believe in Jesus. So, but more modern Christian, nothing Catholic. So afterwards, Catherine and Angela decide to go into the woods, having told their parents that they're going to be studying. The two girls end up going into like some weird, like abandoned well or something, and they sit down and start doing this sort of hypnosis, calling of the dead thing that Catherine tells Angela can summon her mom so she can speak to her. And this is probably just where, they've made their first mistake here. So Angela's father, Victor, after coming home from a late day at work, notices that his daughter is missing and is a little upset about that, considering she was just supposed to be studying. So Victor, being a great dad, calls a bunch of different parents, asks if they've seen his daughter, and they put 2 and 2 together and realize that Catherine and both Angela are missing. So Catherine's parents and Victor start looking around in the forest, trying to find the kids, but no luck. They even find the well thing that they were sitting and chilling in, but again, kids aren't there. Of course, the police get involved. They get a detective. Both of the parents are very upset, very distressed, and spend the next day or so looking for the kids, doing everything they can. And eventually, Victor comes home, very tired, very stressed, and he hears people in his house. And his neighbor Stuart invited these like Christian voodoo people to like do prayers and like bless the house, and Victor's just like, get the fuck out of my house. But these people will come up later, so that's why I'm mentioning them. But yeah, Stuart, that's not very chill to break into somebody's house and start doing religious chants in their house. We then cut to a miscellaneous farm where 2 farmers are talking, and one of their horses died, I guess, and so the younger of the farmers runs to the stable to, get some sort of horse revival kit. And this fool finds both girls just chilling in the barn, soaking wet from the rain. And they just kind of fucking appeared there. So, of course, everyone rushes to the hospital to see what the heck was going on with these little girls. So Victor, reunited with his daughter, tells her that he's not mad at her. He's just so happy she's safe. And the detective is like, hey, Angela, tell your dad how long you thought you were gone. And she doesn't really want to talk about it, but the dad's like, come on, tell me what you know. And she thinks she's only been gone for a few hours, but it's been 3 days. So these kids got some weird amnesia shit going on, but we as the audience know, because this is The Exorcist, she's probably possessed at this point. But the doctors run a bunch of tests and stuff, and physically there's nothing wrong with them. Aside from their feet, which look burned and fucked up, and some of their toenails are not on those feet. So it's very peculiar and strange because literally no damage has been done to them. So after weirdly touching the glass windows of the hospital room they're in, and also Angela slamming her hand on the glass so hard that it cracks it, they are allowed to go home. So later that night, Victor tries to talk to his daughter, but she's really closed off. But as she's talking to him a little bit, we do see that she and her friend were basically possessed by doing this weird hallucination ritual or something. That's not super clear, but there's just kind of like an implication. So Victor goes to go brush his teeth after having put her to bed, and she just starts like teleporting to him and creeping him out a little bit as the lights flicker in the house. And so he's just kind of like, this is a little weirder than my daughter just having gotten kidnapped. The next morning, Victor, having been a good dad and made some pancakes for his daughter Angela, goes to see her. She's accidentally wet the bed, so he, is very cool about it, makes her a bath. And as he's doing this, she suddenly disappears and runs up behind him, and Anne tries to suffocate him with her mother's scarf. Teenagers, am I right? After Victor is able to get her off of him, she starts to have seizures and is taken back to the hospital. They strap her down. She's screaming, yelling things. She's starting to go full possession mode. As they're looking at her body, they notice a bunch of scars and cuts that are all of a sudden there. Her fingernails are starting to come off, and it's, not looking good for her. Meanwhile, Catherine is at church with her parents and is kind of being weird and sneaks off into the back and chugs all of the church wine and then comes down the aisle and starts talking shit to the pastor and just starts repeating blood of Christ or something like that and starts seizuring, and then they grab her and take her to the hospital as well. So Victor and Catherine's parents are obviously both in the same situation now. They are outside of the hospital, kind of taking a coffee break, talking about what's happening to their daughters. And Catherine's mom is like, I for sure think this might be possession. And Victor's like, hell no, there's no way. And they just kind of go back and forth for a little bit. We then go back to Angela and Nurse Ann, the neighbor that I mentioned earlier. She's helping out in the hospital with Angela. And Angela looks at her with some creepy exorcism shit and says like Mother Ann or something and mentions a baby name. So either she has a family member who's dead or died or she got an abortion or something. But we're going to find out later. We do see a little tiny time jump. I have no idea if it's 5 minutes to 5 days, but both Catherine and Angela end up in a mental facility as a result of their freaky deaky shit. So after Victor is coming home, he is approached by Nurse Ann, and she basically gives him the rundown that she's pretty sure that this is an exorcism situation. She then goes, hey, this book I read is pretty dope. It's actually about a woman like 50 years ago who was in The Exorcist 1, and like she dealt with this shit. So you should definitely reach out to this famous author and see if she'll help you. Also, here is my tragic backstory. I was going to be a nun, but then got like crazy vibes from a dude and then banged him, got pregnant, and then had an abortion, and then decided not to be a nun. So I'm really sad about that, but I never told anyone about that. And your daughter knew. So that's really freaky. She's probably possessed by the devil. And you need to go to the lady from The Exorcist 1, the mom, Chris McNeil, and you need to figure this shit out. And so Victor's like, all right, I guess I'll do that. So with the help of his buddies, he somehow gets her information and address and decides to meet up with her. He drives some odd hours to do so. And we see the mom, Chris McNeil, from the first Exorcist. So it's kind of a cool little, cameo for a new trilogy coming out. And at the same time, Nurse Ann is reaching out to a Catholic priest named Father Maddox. And she's basically like, yo, I saw what you guys did in the first movie, so could you please do that again? Is what I'm assuming she's asking him. So back to Angela and Chris. We learn that she spent the last 40 or 50 years being this famous author after writing about the experience that her daughter had, which as a result really pissed off her daughter and embarrassed her. So she hasn't spoken to her daughter in like 20 years or something. And she says that she became obsessed with studying exorcism, and she learns that it's not really tied to just Christianity, and that these demons have existed in all different types of cultures from the beginning of time. And, religion is just kind of a flavor that humans pick for them. And that it's more important to focus on community and healing together and trying to help the person rather than random prayers or whatever. It's basically establishing that like Catholicism is not the right religion. Christianity is not the right religion. It's just one of many that builds community and builds, confidence and belief and trust, and that allows them to push against the demons, which I think is extremely cool. Because, possession movies are like 100% of the time Christian movies. And that's a little boring for me because it's very formulaic. You always know it's going to be a demon or something. But it's just really cool that they kind of acknowledge why they use Christianity and Catholicism as part of their rituals, but also that it doesn't even really matter that anyone can fight against these demons as long as they have belief and community and spirituality, which is just so refreshing. And I'm really surprised that this movie is not getting more praise because that's a pretty unique concept, especially in an exorcism movie. So the Exorcist 1 lady, Chris, decides to come with Victor and visit his daughter Angela in the mental hospital. Angela is now on that demon time, hiding under the bed, speaking in weird ass voices. She, I guess, is the same demon from the first exorcism or something, and kind of makes fun of Chris and says that her daughter is burning in hell and she's just kind of fucking with her. And so for someone who claims to have been studying this for like 40 years, Chris is a little bit easily disturbed by this. So then Chris and Victor go to Catherine's house and comfort her parents and then try to approach Catherine. Chris 1v1s demon Catherine and is like, the power of Christ compels you, and whatever phrases that she's sort of come up with. And it doesn't really work, especially considering she had just told us that it's the power of community and it doesn't really matter what you use, etc. And so, yeah, she gets fucking dunked on and her eye is ripped out by Catherine and she's permanently blinded forever. And you might think, why did Chris do this? Why did this woman who has spent 40 years preparing for this moment go into this head first and just act like a dumbass? And I really want to address this. And I think the reason that she does this is because no matter how much you study, no matter how much research you do, there is no comparison to actual practical real world application. And also she mentioned earlier that she never even saw the exorcism that went down with the Catholic priests from the first movie, that she only heard about it. So I think it was just a really interesting choice to kind of show that, like, hey, this woman, even after all of this studying and stuff, is still really out of her element. And it's also kind of a clever way to get rid of the character who I'm sure everyone was going to assume was the trump card. So I think it was an interesting choice from the writers, as well as sort of showing that, again, if you don't have any real world experience with fucking going toe to toe with demons, you're going to get fucked up and you're probably going to get ahead of yourself. And so, yeah, she's permanently blinded. So we then cut to Father Maddox talking with his Catholic priest bosses. And he's like, yo, this for sure is a demon. We should probably handle this. And for some reason, the Catholic priests who are his bosses are like, we should just probably put her in a mental institution. We don't really believe in the whole exorcism thing. They're just probably insane children. And Father Maddox is like, no, you should probably go see this. And they're like, no, we're not gonna allow this. So please leave. So then we see Victor going to Chris, who's now blind. And he's like, yo, I'm really sorry that Catherine fucked up your eyes. I feel like this is a little bit my fault for getting you involved, especially considering you had no practical experience. And Chris is like, yeah, I kind of fucked up, but I think you really need to, get everybody together and do some crazy exorcism yourself and just have everybody just kind of throw everything at her at once. Just, Christian, Catholic, Christian voodoo, just like go crazy on these bitches and believe in yourself. And that should probably work. But I just got my eyes gouged out, so I guess I'm not the full expert on this, but that's what I would try. So Victor basically assembles the Christian Avengers. He gets the pastor from Catherine's church. They ask Father Maddox. They get the voodoo Christian woman that Stuart brought over, and the whole family's come together to get this exorcism ready. So they set up the house to be exorcism proof. They get 2 chairs back to back. They fucking drill them into the ground, because in other exorcism movies, you'll see the chairs start floating and shit flies around. So they bolt that motherfucker down. They get the medical equipment and stuff ready, thanks to Nurse Anne. And then everybody starts doing their preparation. The voodoo stuff gets done, and there's like some markings on the floor. The priests start praying. They're gearing the fuck up. So just as they're about to start, Father Maddox shows up and tells Nurse Anne and Victor, hey, my bosses said I couldn't help you with this exorcism, so you're going to have to figure this out on your own. Sorry, my bad. And then Nurse Anne is like, that's pretty fucked up. And he's like, yeah, I know. And so everybody gets together and it's just like, fuck. I really thought this Catholic priest was going to be the trump card because we all saw the first movie, right? Like, those are the guys who got it done. And so Nurse Anne is like, actually, I was going to be a Catholic nun. And, it's been probably 30 years, but I think that I can do this. I think I was supposed to have an abortion and move here and be your neighbor, all for this moment to help you. So I'm going to do the Catholic rituals and we're going to dunk on these demons. And so they all look at each other and they're like, all right, it's time to fuck these kids up. So the ritual begins. Everybody just starts doing their praying. Nurse Anne goes the Catholicism playstyle. Then we have Miranda, Tony, Catherine's parents, and their pastor doing the like New Age Christian-y method of praying to try to, psych these demons out. Then we have the woman that Stuart invited, who is a voodoo Christian priest lady. And so she's chanting, giving people necklaces to wear for protection, and they're all just going at her. Victor, however, doesn't seem to really think that it's going to be working. He's looking into his daughter's eyes, who's just kind of laughing at him. Both of the girls are just demonic and talking shit. They look totally fucked at this point, totally gross, skin cracking kind of stuff. And everyone's doing their best. I mean, I think the idea, again, is to get a community together, everyone to put their faith forward and try to help these kids. And at some point, it actually starts to look like it's working a little bit. The voodoo woman throws some water or something on them that she made in the bath, and it actually works a bit. This weird, gas, this brown gas escapes them, and then she throws the water or whatever into the fire, and then the fire explodes and then makes its own smoke, which kills the brown smoke or something. So then the voodoo woman gives Victor the bowl that I guess had some water or stuff in it, and she says, hey, go dump this out by the house. And so he goes to do that, and then he sees Father Maddox still in his car, praying for the kids. And so he goes up to him and he says, hey, quit being a little bitch. It's fucking game time, and you're our star player. Get your ass in here. And so Father Maddox is like, you son of a bitch. So Victor heads back inside. Father Maddox is still unsure if he's going to actually come or not. And he starts to have a conversation with Angela / the demon. And we learn that during his wife's death, when the doctors gave them the choice, he actually chose his wife, not the daughter. And despite that, the daughter lived and the wife died. And at this point, the demons say, look, we'll make you a deal. Pick one of us to live and the other will die. And that's our offer. And so they deny it, but it's a pretty good offer considering things aren't going too well at this point. They sort of were in the lead, and then they kind of went back a few steps a little bit. Exorcism is a long process. It's a little stressful, especially if you're amateurs. Suddenly, as tensions are rising and they're deciding whether or not they should actually take this deal, they're starting to become hopeless. Father Maddox just burst into the fucking room and just starts chanting Santa Maria, blah, 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 and just starts speaking in Latin. So it actually starts to work, and everyone feels really hopeful at this point, and he makes the mistake of touching them on the head as he's praying, and they use some demon magic to snap his fucking neck off of his head. I mean, his head is still attached, but you can see they just fucking break that spine in his neck. And so, of course, everyone is really distressed, but Victor takes a leap of faith and wraps the scarf that was Angela's mother's around her and starts talking to her like a person and not praying at her, and tries to make that connection with her. And it seems like she's actually starting to come back. She's finally making her way back. And of course, Catherine's parents really fuck up and say, we'll take the deal. And as a result, the demon tricked them. And so Angela recovers and lives, and Catherine unfortunately dies. And we see a little scene of her soul lost in the weird well thing and demons coming at her. And I think we can assume that her soul is forever lost and damned into hell because her stupid fucking parents decided to try to make a deal with some goddamn demons. And it's very sad because we see Victor holding his daughter Angela, who's snapped out of it. And we also see in the background Catherine's parents trying to resuscitate her using the shock thingies to try to get her pulse back, but she is dead. They fucked up and lost. And so a little time passes, and Nurse Anne is having a conversation with the detective about what happened, I guess. And she begins to give a little monologue that kind of leaves the movie on a not too much of a downer note. And we see everybody kind of going back to normal with their lives. Catherine's parents, of course, are devastated and shown to be quite depressed and broken. Victor visits his wife's grave. We also see Angela back at school looking totally normal, and she sadly looks over at Catherine's old seat in her class. And the one thing that we do get to see, which is really sweet, is Chris, the Exorcism 1 mom. We see Reagan, the little girl from The Exorcist 1, enter the hospital room and touch her and go, "Hey, mom." And I almost teared up a little bit in the movie theater because I understand how much that meant to Chris. And I thought it was a nice little way to kind of send off those characters. I don't think Reagan's going to come back in the sequel, but we'll see. There's going to be 2 more movies after this. But yeah, it's kind of nice. It's a little bit hopeful. And, my opinion of this ending, I think it's good. I thought that it was mean, but also good because think about it. I mean, this is the first of a trilogy. So having them win wouldn't really make sense. But we got kind of a bittersweet, ending. And the person living, Angela, wasn't even the result of anything they did. They were clearly outmatched. These demons fucking dunked on them. And the only reason they even won is because they made a deal. So they lost and won at the same time. And I think that's kind of bold, especially when it comes to a kid, like a 13-year-old. That's a child death, and that's not always the most popular thing to do in a movie. So that was The Exorcist Believer 2023 film. I liked it. I gave it a 7.8. I know I was kind of silly with this one, but I did really enjoy it. I saw it in theaters. I watched the bootleg just to make sure that I remembered the plot points. And while I don't think I would watch it again by myself, I would definitely watch it with a friend and enjoy the ride. And I will be coming back to watch the sequels. With the summary portion concluded, we can now move on to Trick or Trivia.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
Trivia number 1, the woman who played Chris, Reagan's mother, Ellen Burstyn, originally turned down reprising the role as Chris. And then the producers came back and said, "We will double your salary." So she ended up actually donating that money to help fund scholarships for actors at Pace University. She funded it through the organization Actors Studio, which she is co-president of. Trivia number 2, Linda Blair, the original possessed girl from The Exorcist 1, was actually an advisor on set to the actresses portraying the possessed girls in this film, which is pretty cool considering from what I've heard, it was very stressful for her. Trivia number 3, at the very beginning of the movie when we're in Angela's room, we see a small sculpted creature. That same creature is the same one that Reagan from The Exorcist 1 drew, but with wings in the 1973 Exorcist. That's all I've got for you, so tune in next week for more Trick or Trivia.
I thought you were supposed to be an expert.
There are no experts. You probably know as much about possession as most priests.
Thank you so much for joining me again on another week of We Creeps. Please do be sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, TikTok. I've got it all. Go ahead and check out the link tree in the description or just go to WeCreeps.com. You can also find links to my Patreon and my merch if you want to support the show directly. Thank you to my 4 patrons. I love you. You help me pay for Adobe Audition, and that really makes the magic happen. Adobe products are not fucking cheap. With all of that out of the way, do be sure to keep an extra eye on my socials because I will be posting a 1-year anniversary giveaway. So keep an eye out on the socials to learn more about that. All right, that's the end. So do be sure to not go against demons 1v1, and also make sure to stay spooky out there.